You're listening to Chameleon Church. Biblical Antidotes for the Modern Man. With your host, Allan Aguirre.
How do you like that intro music? I've been using that intro music for a few years and I like it. And it's actually cut shorter than I have it on the actual podcast. I don't know if you know we have a podcast, but if you go to chameleonchurch.com, you'll see links. Go to resources, you'll see a link to the podcast. And there's some old sessions back there. Old podcasts. I haven't done a new podcast in quite a while, simply because I've been doing this for the last year and a half. But there's a great series on the Kingdom of Heaven there. Be sure to listen to the Ian Hellerman session, especially if you're going to be at Take on the World this weekend. Listen to the Ian Hellerman session. I'm not sure if that's number 3 in the Kingdom of Heaven series. He has a testimony about a miraculous healing he had when we first met in Nashville. And Ian will be with me at Take on the World this weekend in Vermilion, Ohio. And he's gonna be hanging out with me, and might actually give him the microphone and share that testimony. It's quite the it's quite the amazing testimony. It was a mind blower, actually. But hey, it's the Chameleon Church Show. I'm your host, Allan Aguirre. It is August 20th. And it's getting a little chilly in the morning. Yeah, it's a little brisk in the morning. It's funny how I always talk about the weather. It's August 20th. I'm coming live and direct to you from Park City, Utah. Beautiful Utah. And I'm your host, Allan Aguirre. And I have at least one of my cohorts is in here so far. And we have, we were going to talk about this. We have Rabbi Darryl. I just remembered Weinberg. Hey, Darryl, how's it going?
It's getting a little brisk here too. It's I think we had 2.5 weeks of summer, and
right,
fall is now approaching.
And I mentioned this when earlier in the year, we were a month late. Our whole whatever we've got, our May was happening in June. Yeah, the weather pattern. I don't know what happened, but we were a month late. So that means we only really had summer starting in July, which was 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I was gone 3 weeks of that 6 weeks. So I'm kind of bummed. Yeah. Because I'm going to be gone this weekend. And then it's Labor Day. Isn't that what it's Labor Day, right? Coming up?
Yes. 2 weeks.
Yeah. And then we're in October. And then I'll be in Seattle in October. And I'm going to come back and there's going to be snow. No.
It'll work on your tan now, man.
What tan? I'm a brown boy. But I've got a white. Oh, man. My buttocks is white.
Well, it should be.
Have you ever seen that meme of Darth Vader in the snow? And he's like, snow. He's kind of bummed out about the snow himself. Snow's coming, man. Mm-hmm. Snow's coming. So Jamie isn't able to, I don't know, maintain the link here. So we have to send him the link. We sent him the link, and he's not here. So, hey, you know what's really, really cool? This is how much my wife is. My wife's pretty cool. Hey, did you guys see the Heroes of the Messianic Lifestyle? Whatever. We both Darryl and I and our wives. I think your son's in it too, isn't he?
No. He makes an appearance.
Yeah. We did a show on the Messianic Lifestyle thing. Where are we? I don't know. Kevin can throw up that link if he wants. But anyway, and so my wife had to leave early this morning, so she poured my coffee in this mug, knowing that I'm on air this morning, so I can sport the brand here, the Rude Awakening mug. It's a pretty cool mug.
It is a cool mug.
Yeah, it's got the cork bottom. It's branded on both sides. All right, well, I have no idea where Mr. Jamie is. And, man, it must be a quiet morning out there in cyberspace.
It is.
Here. I've gotten used to the couple dozen people that are on here in the morning. That's all right. How was your week?
Oh, it's been good. This spiritual assignment that we've got revelation for, and things are really heating up. But the team is coming together. We have a woman from Toronto who is a seer. I mean, she sees in the prophetic unlike anybody I've ever met before. And she's been getting downloads from the Lord just about what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be confronting this and how we're supposed to be dealing with it. And so it's we're excited about what's coming up because there's a lot of messages that have been coming from various places about there's a breakthrough coming, there's a shaking that's coming, God is going to realign things. A few people that I know of listen to a woman called Lana Vosser, and she's out of Australia, and she did a message one time about how everybody has felt like there's this wet blanket over them, and it's been this massive struggle. And it seems that God is getting ready to realign a whole bunch of things right now. And so I'm pretty excited to be part of it and on the forefront of it, because what we have before us could literally transform the DNA of this entire city if it goes according to the way we see it laying out. So just getting prepared for that. And it's not easy. Boot camp has been hard for 5. We're really looking forward to seeing what's going to come out of all this, the fruit of it.
Yeah, that's cool. It's always exciting. We're not really much, whole lot going on here as far as our geographical location, and that's that's fine too. What are you gonna do? My wife said something a while ago, and again, she's pretty prophetic, but what if we're not supposed to build something like a brick and mortar here? What if that's not the plan? What if that's not the idea? But instead of that, we're building this virtual thing that we've been doing with the books and doing stuff like this now. And that's difficult for me because, man, I'm anti cyber church. I'm anti Facebook is my church. I'm anti that stuff, because that's not healthy. That cannot be your only source of fellowship. That cannot be your only source of information. It's incredibly dangerous if you're not walking in community, walking in covenant community with other human beings. I'm like so against that. But I'm seeing, obviously I understand the resource that this is. I obviously understand the resource that books are. I understand the resource that music is. And I've been doing that for decades. And I understand the resource that something like this is to people. And so so is this how it's supposed to look? Is it supposed to look more like this versus a brick and mortar? And I'm okay with that. I don't have a need of a brick and mortar, obviously. And I'm surprised I'm doing this because I wasn't planning. This wasn't like if you look at my life plan, this wasn't on the list, so it's interesting, but this
wasn't part of my plan until I got an email from Mark last March. So
yeah, I've never even considered doing this until I ran into Mark and he said, "Hey, would you like to be a guest on this show?" Sure. And then can you come back next week? Sure. Can you come back next week? Sure. Can you lead it? Oh. And here we are, a year and a half later. I enjoy it though. I get a lot of messages. I posted a message that we got yesterday from last week's show, which was it was a wonderful message. I mean, it was like, this makes it all worthwhile. It makes all the drama, it makes all the junk that goes with it so worthwhile. And so that's pretty cool. That's cool. That makes it cool. And it's in a way, doing this and the conferences, it's a different form of touring. Obviously, I'm used to life looking a certain way with the music side of it. So this is a form of touring, I guess. I mean, right? I mean, we're in people's living rooms or bedrooms or whatever. And we're getting feedback from people saying, hey, I understand some people live in rural areas or people live in areas where there's no place to go. I mean, I don't 100% buy that though. I think wherever you live, you could be fellowshipping with other believers somewhere, and they don't have to look like you. They don't have to be wearing tassels and carrying a gold encrusted shofar over their shoulder.
But you have one of those.
I don't actually wearing white linen. You know what I'm saying? They don't have to look like that because it's not about that. It just isn't about that. Jesus spent the majority of his time with non-believers. It's okay if you hang out with a Christian church, or if you go to a Christian church on a Sunday, you'll be okay. God will, And besides, if you're not out there doing that, who are you talking to about what? Email? Are you doing this virtually again, online? Again, I think an online only life is an incredibly strange thing.
Shallow.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Don't do that. It's not healthy. So Jamie's trying to text me. It says he's backstage. Is there a backstage area in this app?
Really?
He's in the green room, going through the yellow M&Ms. I don't know where a backstage is.
Is that on your writer?
Right? I didn't get it. Talking about writers, I heard that somebody. Anyway, I told the Take on the World guys last night. I didn't send you a writer. I respect you too much. Looking for the backstage area. Do you know anything about backstage in this thing?
I didn't know there was a front stage. I didn't know there was a stage.
I think we're on the front stage. I didn't know anything about a backstage. How weird. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. He's going to be stuck in virtual backstage. So
how does Jamie find this stuff, man?
I don't know.
He's the guy that goes through the back of the closet into Narnia.
Right. Well, he found the backstage of, where are we? Of StreamYard. I don't know where that is. I don't know where that is. But and Desiree is saying, Desiree is saying, this network I thank Jehovah for, and I do too. I have found some really. I believe I have a camaraderie with Darryl and Jamie that is important to me. It's part of my DNA now. It's part of my everyday. Oh, what's he saying? Only the host can bring me in. All right, so we need to see how I just brought him in. Oh, you know what? I can't send him an email. I don't have email on this computer. Can you send him an email? I sent him a text message.
I did.
He said he didn't get the email. Sorry, people. We're trying to get Jamie in here. Working on it. I'm on a computer that doesn't have email set up, and so I can't send him an email link. So, but yeah, I did Christian rock music for 30 plus years, and it always blew my mind. Who goes to a Christian rock concert and leaves believing in Jesus? I thought that was weird. And I'm the guy up there going, hey, you need to come to Jesus. But I still thought that was weird. So it's not like I'm biased. No, I thought what I did was weird then. I think what I do now is weird now. But apparently it works. Apparently it's a real thing, and that's fine. So I'm just rolling with it. So I enjoy doing this. And like I said in the intro, we'll be in Ohio this weekend. Looking forward to that. I'm going in there. So last night over dinner, we were talking about the armor of God, talking to the grandkids. The 9 and 5-year-old were listening. The 2-3-year-old wasn't too attentive to it, and we're talking about, putting on the shoes of the peace of the gospel. And it's like, I want to show up this weekend wearing the shoes of peace of the gospel. I want to show up this weekend because there's going to be there's people there that believe stuff I don't believe in. There's people there that have been doing this and trying to involve me with that, and I'm like, nope. Since this year, and I'm not gonna deal to drama. So it's I really take it. Paul says, I want to know Christ and Him crucified among you. That's so important, because that's just all that matters at that point. So Jamie's showing me screenshots of him in backstage. He's backstage. He shows up to you're backstage. Only the host can see you. The host may add you to the broadcast at any time. Be ready. I don't see you. How weird. I can't send him an email. I don't have email set up on this computer.
I sent him an email, but he hasn't responded to it. I've sent him a couple of texts. He's not responding to those.
Darryl,
there it is.
you.
Okay, yes, it says I'm in the backstage waiting for host.
Yeah, the host is going to let him in. What does that mean, Allan? Can you? I'm not sure what you mean. There's like a 5-second time delay, Desiree. So what do you? What is your question? What do you mean? What do I mean about what? And I'll be happy to answer that while we're trying to find Jamie backstage. I don't know. I don't know how to get him in here. I don't see him. Let's see what Desiree has to say. Sorry, people. We're trying to get. We're Jamie's in limbo, backstage limbo, and we don't see him. Nobody sees him, and we can't bring him in. The hands butting. Just conflict, drama. People love drama. I don't like drama. There was some people running around trying to get me bumped off of networks and shows and interviews and even conferences. But anyway, there's going to be people. There's a whole bunch of differences of theological and doctrinal beliefs, and I just want to be an agent of peace. I want to show up this weekend. We were talking, like I said, we were talking about the armor of God with our grandchildren at dinner last night, and I was explaining to them how I want to show up this weekend wearing the shoes of the peace of the gospel, and be a peacemaker. I'm not going there. I don't have an agenda. I'm not showing up with a soapbox. I'm going there to minister. I'm going there to teach, and I'm going there to serve. And I'm not going there to cause division or to cause strife or contention. Or I'm not a factionalist, so I don't do those type of things. So being an old punk rocker, I know what that's all about. There's no room for that in the kingdom of God. There's no room for that among his people. There's no room for that among us. There just isn't. And some of it actually make that their ministry, which is just weird. So I'm excited. And but that's what's going on. We got trying to find Jamie out in here. Yep, we are to wear the full armor. That's absolutely right. So anyway, I don't know what to do about Jamie. I can't send him an email. And apparently I'm the host. How am I the host? You're the one that popped in here first. I don't know. I don't know. Hey, I got a haircut. You tell?
Yes, very nice.
Julian and I, my grandson and I, he's 9. He's one of my buddies. We go get haircuts together. It's awesome. And this time, instead of waiting for each other, we got them done at the same time. So we're sitting there looking at each other, getting our haircuts. It was rad. Yeah, so many do not wear that full armor. Yeah, and that's right. And it's obvious. It's evident. They're walking around dragging their shield. They lost their sword somewhere. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. So, hey, I wanted to bring something up because it was brought up last week. Apparently, so I remember last week's intro, I looked at Darryl and I go, "How you doing, Rabbi?" And I called him, and that's what I said. And we had some comments come up that you can't call a man rabbi, you can't call him leader, you can't call him all this stuff. And it's like, I understand what Jesus is teaching. Apparently it's not an issue that he was called rabbi because he's the only great teacher and he's the only great wise one and master and all. I cook on the Sabbath. Unlike a lot of people, I don't believe that we cannot cook on the Sabbath. And they use that based on one verse, right? Gather all that you have on Friday for 2 days. Bake and boil what you will on Friday, and then put the rest aside. And from there, they're assuming that you can't cook on Saturday. It never says that. It literally never says that. In fact, when it comes to the high Sabbath days, it says to cook what you have to eat on that day. So I figure if you're allowed to cook on the high Sabbath, you're able to cook on the Sabbath. It never says you cannot cook on the Sabbath. But then it says, well, you're not supposed to light a fire on the Sabbath. Okay, well, are we talking about what kind of a fire? Is that a fire? I mean, anyway, it's just, I'm not looking for ways to make this more difficult. And I'm also not looking for loopholes and ways out. So it was kind of like we were kind of chastised. I was kind of chastised for calling Darryl Rabbi. And and everyone knows the verse where Jesus says, "Don't call any man a rabbi. Don't call him a leader. Don't call him a rabbi." Should we look it up? What is that?
Matthew 23:8.
And so I thought, you know what? Now this show started off as a roundtable for the Torah portion. That was the original intention of the show. We've kind of have expanded that. Sometimes we will talk about stuff that doesn't show up in the Torah portion or isn't necessarily in there, or we'll talk about something that is related to the Torah portion because that's the way God designed it. But I wanted to have this conversation because it's important, I guess, to some people. What did you say, Matthew? What did you say?
23:8.
23:8.
Okay, I gotta text Jamie the link here.
Okay, so it says here, let's read it in context. And here's why I think it's also important. I have a rabbi. He's a very prophetic man. He's somewhere in Georgia. He's way out there in the middle of nowhere. And he wanted to ordain me a rabbi, and I said no because I don't know Hebrew. I think I should know Hebrew before I do that, or something like that. Anyway, so let's see what it says. We're in Matthew chapter 23. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do, for they preach but do not practice." Okay, I mean, that to me that's obvious. Okay, so they sit on Moses' seat. They're the ruling authority. Do what they say while they're sitting on Moses' seat. You have to do what they teach you because they're teaching you the Torah. But don't exemplify their example. Don't copy their example of being hypocrites because they don't do what they preach or practice. Okay? I'm not reading it. Oh my gosh. Are you reading it in the King James version only? No. No, I don't do that either. See, I'm such a bad guy. I don't do that either. No. So I hope you deal with all this on your do-it-yourself shows, DIY shows. I'm not quite sure what that means. But anyway, so that's what Jesus says. For they preach but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their fingers. Okay, so far, he's talking about the Pharisees. He's not talking about you and I. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. Again, that doesn't apply to us. And they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Again, not applicable. And being called rabbi by others. Okay. Darryl has never said, "Allan, be sure you call me rabbi." Now, I have heard pastors say that. Pastors go by the word to put their name. What's your name? Pastor Bill. Oh, okay, how's it going, Bill? That's what I do. I do know a lot more. I know more pastors that do this than rabbis, where they insist to be called pastor. And I've always gone, well, I'm the apostolic prophet, Allan Aguirre. Oops. Did I just say that? I just said that out loud and publicly. Anyway, I have seen pastors do this. Darryl has never said, "Oh, you have to call me rabbi," because that's, again, we don't roll like this. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors or leaders, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. I'm reading out of the English Standard Version. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ, or Messiah, Jesus. So we're not supposed to call each other rabbi or master or leader or instructor or father or contextually. Oh. There he is. Contextually, there's a whole other thing going on, right? Jamie, welcome.
The prodigal son has come home.
You know, the StreamYard, the one that you sent me, apparently it wasn't the right one because it's a whole different DCI. You know, so anyway, I got the right one now.
So did they have coffee, tea, or what did they have backstage? Whiskey, beer, and did you have Did you get your yellow M&Ms?
Yeah. Oh no, they didn't have. They had green tea, and I didn't like it at all. It was terrible.
No alcohol?
No alcohol, no nothing.
Oh, that's probably
No.
I think I was in the wrong backstage.
Oh, it was. I know, because this show has a rad backstage, dude. You've got cable, video games,
CNN.
yeah, only CNN, only the best and leftist propaganda in our green room. I just said that out loud too, didn't I? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. One of the, it's a bad green room when you've got like really bad white bread and some sandwich meat and a thing of mustard, and they go, "Here's dinner," and you want to break somebody's fingers. You said that out loud too. Anyway, we're talking about Matthew 23, is it? Where are we? I don't know where we are. Yeah, we're in Matthew 23. We're talking about calling man rabbi, because I called Darryl rabbi last week and got a couple comments about how you can't do that. And so we were discussing it. And so we're trying to put it in context. Jesus is talking to his disciples, well, the people as well, about the Pharisees and how they like to be called rabbi and how they like to have their tassels swinging below their ankles and how they love to be greeted in the marketplace. And it's all showboating. We don't call people, now that I have seen that in Christendom when it comes to pastors. You'll ask a pastor his name and he'll tell you, "I'm Pastor George." And you're like, "I'm pastor." And it's like they have to put the word pastor in front of their name as if, to me, I've always thought that was weird.
Pentecostals are really big on that.
Right. See, why? Okay, explain this to me. Why is putting pastor in front of your name weird to me, but putting rabbi in front of your name isn't? And I've been around Christians more than Messianics or Torah people. I don't know. But it's always bugged me. The whole "got to call me pastor" thing. It's like
I had a guy who I'd known years and years ago. Like I hadn't seen him for probably about 15, 17 years. And one day he just pops into the congregation. And I looked at him as like, "I remember you." Like it was when I first got saved. And I said, "What's your name?" And he says, "Doc." Doc. I said, "Is that what's on your birth certificate?" And so then he told me what his real name was.
Yeah, I actually use that line because people will give me like their nickname, and I'm like, "What's your birth certificate name? What's your birth name?" "Oh, Jordan or Daniel." And then I'll say, "How's it going, Daniel?" So we're wondering. So Jesus. So I read the passage. They like to be called rabbis, but you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher. You are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. So we're not supposed to call each other rabbi, teacher, instructor, leader, father. What's going on here? Can we not call a leader a leader? Can we not call a rabbi? Can we not call our father? What I want perspective here. I mean, I don't think I have the answer to that. So let's see what we think. What do you think, Jamie, on that?
Well, I don't, the rabbi, it means teacher. I don't think to me, it's not a problem, but I think it's the Torah community in general, over the years that I've been involved, it was a major deal to call somebody rabbi. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, people thought that just because of that verse, they were taking that and said, "Well, no man is to be called rabbi." And, to me, it's a teacher. It's a guy that teaches. Now, a rabbi in Israel is a little different than a rabbi. The way we call rabbis in Messianic, they go to school for a long time, and it's a little bit different analogy for them than it is for us. But it doesn't bother me, especially with Darryl. I just assume teachers I'd call him teacher. I might even call him father. I like the guy. You know what I mean?
Well, but then if you continue reading, he lays into the Pharisees and the scribes hard, man. I mean, we're talking, this is brutal stuff that he goes into. So contextually, this is an open rebuke to the Pharisees and the scribes.
So what are you saying? I mean, we're not talking in the same context as they are, because we're not talking to a rabbi.
No, they're not. And you know what really upsets me?
What really chaps your hide?
Yes, what really frosts my rhubarb about all this is that it would take someone 5 minutes to really figure this out. I mean, anything is available to anybody. And what people are doing, and they're doing it all the time. And I had last year a guest, some jumped up 24-year-old punk who came into my congregation, obviously with a divisive spirit. And he sat there and looked at me and told me that. And I said to him, "You are being disrespectful in my congregation and you need to leave now." Because he was outright challenging my authority. I really wish people would be Bereans and that they would go, and if something doesn't make sense to them, go look at it, go do the research, or if you can't find it, then come to say, well, this verse says this. How do you explain it, instead of because I'm assuming that the tone of the emails was correction. Is that right, Allan?
Yeah, they basically wanted me to know, and it was very passive aggressive. They didn't even actually say it directly. They just quoted the verse out of nowhere, and I'm like,
yeah. So they're not coming to you in the spirit of, can you please clarify this as to why you're doing this when the verse says this? No. They're saying the verse says this, and you don't know what you're doing, and so smarten up.
That's my favorite part about the internet. Everyone is smarter than the other guy, and everyone has a need to let you know that.
So, you know, the thing that really bothers me about this, listen, the titles to me mean nothing. Okay. The only title that I'm really passionate about is a servant of God. That's what I want to be known as. Now, whether people call me rabbi, I always use the phrase, and everybody knows it. They said, well, people will come to me all the time. Well, what should we call you? I said, you can call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for dinner. Okay. Bottom line. So, you know, and before people start getting all jumped up on everything else, why not just go and see what's available out there? Because you don't need to have a huge library like I've developed over the years. I got over 1,000 books in my library. But you can find out just about anything with a couple of clicks of the button. Be a Berean. Go do your study. Find out what the context is. And this is really what the issue is. One of the main issues in the Messianic movement is we got a bunch of people coming in. It's like the sacred name thing. You get a whole bunch of people who are saying, well, this is the name of God, and you have to say it this way, or otherwise you can't be saved. And these people don't even know Hebrew.
Right. And so I know it's insane. Here's something a lot of people don't know. And I've been dealing with the sacred name thing since I haven't been dealing with it. I've been dealing with somebody that's involved since 92. So I've been dealing with sacred namers, how they think, the whole insanity that's wrapped up in it for a long time.
It's legal.
Yeah. And
so going back to the context of the passage, as you said, what Yeshua is doing in Matthew 23, and he unloads a blistering attack against the rabbis, against the Pharisees. And he cuts them down to size. I mean, they were walking away holding their tushies after, because he scorched them so bad. You got the 7 woes and everything else. When he said, call no man rabbi, because what they were doing is, rabbi comes from the Hebrew word rav, which means master. And so what they were doing is they were tossing around titles with each other, and they were exalting themselves. And so there was this whole thing about, you know, this is a master and everything else. But what he's saying is that you really only have one master. But if we took that literally, then you're not allowed to call anybody context. So every time my son calls me father, I have to say, no, the Bible says you can't call me father. I mean, that's absurd when you think about it, but this is where this thing is going.
Right. So it's like, oh, so do I? Is it okay to call him pops, dad, daddy? If I can't,
You with the face, like, how far do we take this?
Right.
And it comes back to context. You got to look at what is going on in the passage. Basic hermeneutics is you have to look at who the author is. You have to look at who the audience is. You have to look at the subject that they were dealing with. Then you have to look at the socioeconomic and political conditions that they were dealing with. Because, like, for instance, Peter deals with a lot of things in his couple of epistles that had to do with they were needing to kind of skirt around the Roman Empire, because by the time Peter writes his epistles, he's nearing the end of his life. And very much like Paul, when he wrote the book of Romans, you have Nero in power. And Nero was a certified head case. I mean, he was the guy who was crucifying Christians and then throwing tar on them and lighting them up as candles for his garden parties. And so when he's talking about certain things, he's got to be careful to make sure that it's phrased in such a way where he doesn't get killed before his due time. And so it's the same thing. You're looking at what you're dealing with in the entire New Covenant, or in the entire gospel accounts, is you have a family feud that's going on. You have Yeshua confronting the religious authorities, and they had corrupted the word of God. And Yeshua's whole point, who was the word, he was the Torah that became flesh, comes back to set things in proper order. And so what he's dealing with the Pharisees, I don't lord it over people. I've only ever had to pull out the rabbi card once. And that's because a guy was committing outright rebellion right in front of my face.
Yeah.
Am I qualified to be called rabbi? Well, I do have 2 ordinations from Christian denominations, the Southern Baptist Convention in the States and the Associated Gospel Churches here in Canada. It's a major denomination. I've been ordained by both of those organizations. I read Hebrew. I know some, I don't speak it fluently, but I read it, I can sing it, I can chant it, I can do the Torah. I have enough Hebrew where I can kind of make sense of certain things and stuff like that. But the whole point of calling someone a rabbi, as Jamie said, it's a teacher. And that's what I do all the time. I teach.
Right. And that's another reason why I'm glad you brought it up, because this is a nice little segue. Another reason why I wanted to discuss this is because if we can't call each other leader or teacher, right, if we're taking this portion of this passage out of context, because I believe it's being used out of context, because it is completely surrounded by, hey, I'm warning you about the scribes and the Pharisees. I brought them up, I mentioned this, and then I'm going to tear into them. I think that's the context, not what everyone is making it. Because at that point, then if this is true, if the position that we cannot call a man rabbi or teacher or instructor or father, if that's true, then doesn't that apply to the fivefold ministry? Then I can't call somebody an apostle, a prophet, a teacher, there's that word again, an evangelist or a pastor, a shepherd. That would then have to apply as well, because those are titles. And one of those titles is teacher, which is what we're being told here. We can't say based on the red letter in this passage in Matthew. I think we have it out of context. I think we have it. I don't think we're understanding it correctly. I agree with both of you on the context and what's being said. It's more of a warning towards the haughty and all that craziness than the actual role or position, office, right? Because I mean, I look at it this way: if we're not allowed to call any man a rabbi, a master, a teacher, or an instructor, how are we getting away with calling them an apostle and a prophet? An apostle and a prophet trump a teacher. So I figure if we can't call people teacher, then we can't call people prophet and apostle, and we know that's just not true.
Yeah, but
that gets even wackier now. And again, I bring it up, and there's two reasons why I wanted to talk about this, is because our audience is growing, and some of them are going to have a problem with us calling you rabbi, and some of them are going to have a problem with the word apostle and prophet. Daughter of the king. See, I love that. Daughter of the king, daughter of Zion. I have no problem calling women daughter of Zion when I pray over them and when I'm praying for them, because that's what they are. That's who you are. I'm going to speak into your future, reach out with the power of the age to come and bring it to your now. It's the prodigal son speaking things into existence that need to be.
It comes down to what the motivation is. Why are we doing this? I have, especially in the Pentecostal movement, I have a denomination up here, the Church of God, and predominantly Caribbean. And most of these guys that I deal with are bishops.
Yeah.
And so I'll call them bishop. They call me rabbi. That's because that's more of a cultural thing than anything else. But I've got one of them who's a very good friend of mine. And we, in public, I'll always call him bishop. I'll always respect him in front of his congregation. But when I'm staying over at his house, I'm calling him by first name. He's calling me by my first name.
Mm-hmm.
There's no pretense about this.
Yeah.
I think he nailed it. It's all about respect. And what we don't have today in our society is respect. We don't have people in Congress that don't even call the president, they call him Trump. I mean, what's that all about? It's president. I mean, the guy was duly elected president.
They call him profanities too.
Oh, they all kinds. There's no respect in a lot of areas. But when I call you rabbi, and somebody, let's say you respect me, Allan. So when I say rabbi to him, I'm showing a genuine respect to who he is and the authority that I'm giving him to be a teacher. And how you take that one way or the other, if you respect me, you can respect what I'm calling him. But, people don't want to respect anybody. Kids don't want to respect dads. The whole thing. The respect has been lost in our society because the 10 Commandments and other things have been taken out. So they take out the respect. If we could just respect each other, for God's sake.
So we have. So let's look at this in the context. Romans is a good example, right? Paul's writing Romans to predominantly Gentile church, and under Nero, who's like this the worst, and he's saying, no, you gotta submit to these authorities. You have to, let's say we lived in England, let's say we lived in the UK with the monarchy, and I'm a Torah observer, and I can't call them now Lord or Lady or Duke or the Queen. I mean, it's the same thing applies.
I went to a Messianic synagogue for a little bit while I was in between gigs, and this was a special kind of congregation, let me tell you.
I've been to a lot of special kinds.
Oh boy! And it was my wife who insisted. Like I knew this guy, and she said, "Well, I want to go to this congregation." I was like, "What? Are you serious?" She said, "No, we got to go." So we ended up starting to go, and we went for a couple of months. And every Shabbat we would go, I would have to yell at her all the way home because I would be so frustrated at what I was seeing. But it was really funny because there was one time I was sitting in the back, and I'm talking to God, and I just said, God, look at the way this man behaves. And I said, yet he's got 100 people here, and they're all really devoted to him. I said, what's going on? And God just said to me, and when I give you your own congregation, you're not going to deserve it either. so shut me right up after that. But the last day that I was there, he got up there and he called himself two things, and it just blew me away. And this was on the internet too. He called himself the Kohen Gadol, which is the high priest. And then he called himself the big kahuna. And that, to me, that was it for me. And so when we were downstairs for Oneg for the lunch after, I was talking to someone, and he walked past me, and I said, oh, look, there's the big kahuna. And I got an email that week and said, don't bother coming back. So, but again, it was all about self-glorification. It was all about bringing attention to self. I mean, how does someone have the chutzpah to get up there and call himself the Kohen Gadol?
Make a perimeter and stand back.
Stand back.
Start drawing circles. Yeah, that's bad. That's bad. Well, it's like anyone that would put the word apostle like in front of their name or their business card.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, what is it that you don't understand about if you are an apostle? What is it that you don't understand about being an apostle? You need to be covert, not overt. This is like
apostle means to be sent out.
Yeah.
That's it. If you are sent out, I'm an apostle. I go into new territory where there's no messianic works, and I establish new congregations. That's what we do. Allan, you got to start calling me apostle now.
I'm not calling. Yeah. So again, fair warning to those watching. The word rabbi is used here. The word apostle and prophet is used here, or the titles, or the offices, or the roles. Those are used here. We're special. Just like there's other special. It's a special type. This is a special YouTube channel. We're special too. We are believers of the way, that believe in that observe Torah, that believe that Jesus is Messiah. But we also believe in speaking in tongues, healing the sick, casting out demons, raising the dead, and we fraternize with Christians.
I even go to Christian churches and preach there.
Those are all trigger words to a lot of the Torah community. And we are glad you're here. We're glad you're watching. We're glad that you're following along. And we just want to let you guys know that's our position. This is where we come from. We are not anti-Christian. We're not anti any of that stuff. No, we're not. Nope. There's plenty of groups out there you can hang out with that believe that stuff. This ain't one of them. And and we wear tassels and we eat biblically.
And it all comes back to the heart.
Yeah.
The heart.
It really does.
Last Shabbat, I had a chance to speak to the Kenyans again. And I was, my head was just kind of spinning. I really wasn't feeling well all day Saturday. And I had to do 2 messages. So by the time we get the house prepared and everything else, I lay down, I get a few hours sleep, and then, I get the phone call. Okay, we're ready to go. So I come down to my office, shake the cobwebs from my head. Didn't know what I was talking about for probably about the first 15, 20 minutes. But anyway, we kind of got on track, and I shared with them a few things. And the response that I get every time I talk to these guys is unbelievable. They always tell me, I said every single time, okay, do we have any questions? And I may get one question, but it'll always end off that someone will get up and say, thank you so much for your teaching. We've really learned a lot. And now we're going to take this and we're going to share this with other people. And every single time I talk to them, they have someone new who's showing up because of the evangelizing that they're doing, because they're the only Sabbath-keeping congregation in the entire city, because it's a couple 100,000 people. And the pastor called me yesterday. He has about 50 orphans that I talked to you about last week. He has about 50 orphans living in his house. Yesterday, he told me, because I asked, so how's it going with the kids? He says, well, today there was no food, so we prayed and they had to go to bed hungry. And I'm thinking, okay, God, you have to do something. You have to you put this burden on me. You got to do something now. You've got to make a way for me to provide. You've got to make a way for me to get over there so that I can be a blessing to these people. You can't just leave this hanging. And, he's saying that they're encouraged and everything else and whatnot, but it's a challenge for them. Well, no kidding. The kids need to eat. And so I told him, I said, listen, we're working on a couple things over here, but you make sure you tell your congregation, I'm coming soon. And I'm saying that in faith. I'm declaring it that at some point in time in the near future, hopefully this fall sometime, I'm going to be over in Kenya, and I'm going to be there to make sure that these kids are taken care of, because that's the essence of the gospel. You can call me rabbi, you can call me whatever you want. I don't care. As long as I know that I'm being pleasing to my Father in heaven, then all the other stuff is really irrelevant. We got to bring it back into context.
Yeah.
So people's got to stop jumping on these horses and charging off into stuff that's meaningless. If you don't understand why we're doing something that seems to contradict the Bible, then ask. Go do research. Don't fire off emails and say, well, you want to be the teacher, because you don't have the authority to be the teacher.
Yeah. My favorite is I love the internet. I think the internet is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I mean, I really do. And it was my day job since '98. It's
even better than sliced bread.
Yeah. It's made a nice income for me. I think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. But I also hate the internet because it's given anybody with an internet connection and a computer a voice, an unvetted voice. And there's nothing worse than an unvetted voice. It's problematic, it's dangerous, and I can't stand it. And here's why. So I love, like the comments sometimes we'll get comments, whether it's here or Facebook or wherever whatever. And not only is it absolutely important for these people to let you know how much smarter they are than you are and how wrong you are, but then they bring their soapbox with them and they just start, they hijack your deal and they start, doing what we just read, grandstanding. And it's like, you need to go start your own channel or your own page. You need to go start your own show. You need to go do your own thing, and go do it over there. Go sell crazy somewhere else. We're all stocked up here. You know what I'm saying? And that's my favorite part about these people, is because that shows you their heart. See, your heart isn't to actually your heart isn't actually concerned for me that I might be wrong or that I might be in error.
You just want to be right.
That's not their heart. Their heart is, you need to know how right I am and how I've got all my stuff together. Thank you. That's not the Spirit of God. And these people don't understand that. And probably the most amazing thing to me is how these people don't understand that that's not the Spirit of God.
Well, they believe that there's a sixfold ministry.
Yeah.
Corrector.
Yeah. It's like, and I've gotten pretty excited on this show before, and I get excited because what we're talking about is life or death. What we're talking about is vital. And if I get excited, it's because I'm incredibly passionate about whatever it is we're talking about, and I think it's that important. But I'm also a vetted voice. I've been vetted for 30 plus years, and this is our show. And I didn't, this was given to me. This isn't, again, like we were talking about earlier. We didn't see ourselves doing this. This wasn't on our life goal list, So we need to, you don't want to, don't be a troll. Trolls, come on, don't be a troll. And if you really, if you really do believe you're right, and you're smarter than everybody else, and you've got something to say, go start your own thing.
If you're going to bring a message of correction, you better be operating. I mean, this isn't a carte blanche statement, but most of the times, the people who have a message of correction on that level are prophets. That was the job of the prophet, to go correct the ways of the people. But what was the purpose? To bring them back to the truth. And what Yeshua is doing with the Pharisees in this passage is he is correcting the error in which they were operating in. They were all about self. They were all about bringing glory to themselves. They were about, running around patting each other on the back while disdaining everybody else around them, because, especially the Sadducees, they had contempt for the common people. Even though they ran the temple, they were supposed to be the ones to bring the people into worship of God.
Right. Versus what they were doing. And it's, and I'm not saying you can't challenge us. I'm not saying you can't bring stuff to us. No, I'm not saying that at all. I love a great, healthy discourse, obviously. And I'm also not saying that you can't correct us and that we can't be wrong. That's not true either. What I don't like and what I won't tolerate is grandstanding and that's that vile spirit. I won't tolerate that. If you come at me with an agenda, I'll smack you. This sheep bites. So don't do that. If we truly are saying something that's concerning to you and you bring it to us, we have the discernment to know whether you're coming to us.
I have,
and if you know us, we're an open book. So
I have several meetings that I have to have this week with people in our fellowship, and they're not going to be fun meetings. Because the Lord has been highlighting a bunch of different things to us that need to be corrected. But what people also have to understand is the time that we're living in. And that I've been saying this for a while, and I'll keep saying this, is that what once was tolerated within the body is no longer going to be tolerated. God is rolling up his sleeves, and he's getting ready to unload a whole can of whoop tushy here. And because he's getting ready to judge the earth, before he can judge the earth, 1 Peter 4:17 says that he must judge his body first. He's got to cleanse it, because otherwise he can't lay out judgment on the earth and let his body be in the condition that it's in, because the devil can then run to him and say, you're being a hypocrite. So what's happening is that what was once accepted or tolerated within the body is not going to be accepted anymore. Judgment has become, we always look at that in the future tense. Judgment has begun in the house of God. And what people have been getting away with, or thinking that they've been getting away with, is now being called to the forefront. And so I have some meetings this week with some people in order to do some course correction. But what is the intent of my correction? Is it to, unload on them because I'm frustrated with them? Yeah, they really hacked me off, especially this last week. I mean, it was amazing. For those who saw my message, I talked all about unity in the body. I talked all about submitting to one another. I talked all about serving one another instead of self. And as soon as I finished the message and we went off air, everybody went and did exactly the opposite of what I said. And I was feeling awful that day. I wasn't eating and everything. And so, my wife and I, we've been kind of analyzing things and figuring out where the problem really lies. And so now we've got a couple of meetings set up this week to deal with this. But what is my motivation? My motivation is to get these people back on track so that they don't face the discipline of God. Because what's going to happen soon is that the discipline of God, if people continue to resist it, is going to turn into the judgment of God. You cannot continue to resist discipline, because otherwise God's going to say, that's it. And he'll give you over. And nobody wants to reach that point. But there's a whole bunch of people who are going to reach that point, because God has to toughen his people up and straighten them out. Otherwise, they're going to go running after the Antichrist when he shows up on the scene.
Yeah, it's sticky. It's
Hebrews 12 is all about discipline. And it says that we had earthly fathers who disciplined us for the best that they could. How much more our Father in heaven, who disciplines us out of love? We discipline out of love. I care for these people. God has given me this sheep. Every once in a while, you want to throw one on the barbecue, but still, we love them and we strive with them, and we want to get them on the right path. Right. The shepherd loves his sheep.
Right. And a good shepherd gives his life up for the sheep. And we have shepherd's heart, and it's like I said, I was saying, it's sticky. It's difficult because people don't like to be corrected. People don't want correction. People don't want to be corrected, and they will actually turn on you if you try it. A lot of them will. The majority will. That's unfortunate, But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that whole rabbi, teacher, instructor thing up because again, our audience is growing, and people are going to hear things that they don't agree with, and that's why I brought up the whole cooking on the Sabbath. A lot of people don't cook on the Sabbath, and why I do, and why I don't think that's what it's talking about, and that's all right, and it's okay if you do not cook on the Sabbath. If you choose not to cook on the Sabbath, man, more power to you.
Everybody must work out his own salvation in fear and trembling.
Yeah, I'm not going to impose that on. I'm not going to impose cooking on the Sabbath on you. Don't impose not cooking on the Sabbath on me. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying, I think women are supposed to wear tzitzits. There's people out there that say no. I'm not pushing it on you. Don't judge another man's servant. It's real simple, unless it's sin, unless we're talking about sin, that's different. Hey, you can't be doing that. You can't be saying that. That's different than what I just mentioned. The two examples I gave. And be kind to your Christian brothers and sisters. Remember when you didn't observe Torah? Okay, so God was merciful and kind and gracious to you. Be merciful and kind and gracious to your Christian brothers and sisters that don't have this piece of the puzzle yet, because they're still your brethren. They're still, yeah. So, yeah. So, hey, Jamie, what's going on over there? What are you up to?
Well, it goes back, I think, there's so many things here. But it goes back to really loving each other, loving one another. You're talking about these people in your congregation, Darryl. I tell you what, I don't know what's happening to folks, but they're not hearing the word of God. They're not hearing what people are saying. They're just spewing out this stuff of whatever. I don't know what the energy or the wavelengths they're picking up, but they're picking up something other than what's being said. Or I'm losing my mind because you speak to people and they don't hear you. They don't hear it.
Nope.
Good luck you talking to them. See if they can wake up. Make sure they hear you though. Stop and reframe and make sure they understand. Because I tell you, it's light versus darkness, and we got so much stuff going on. People's heads are just full of garbage. They're just not hearing anything. It's really tough. It's interesting time. Fun time.
People don't want to get off their own thrones. And the main problem is, and I addressed this in my message, is that when you made Yeshua Lord of your life, you gave up all your rights. But people want to move him back out off the throne so they can sit back on it. They want him to be Lord of their salvation. They don't want him to be master of their lives. They don't want him to be master of their finances. They only want him to provide the money so they can spend it whatever way. And James says, you don't have because you don't ask. You ask and you don't get because you ask with the wrong motives.
Yeah.
And so I believe our job as shepherds and leaders is to make sure that the people are on track and along the path. The shepherd has to protect the sheep because they go off here, they go off there. And anytime you're outside of the will of God, then you're invoking judgment. You cannot plead the blood of Yeshua over a situation if you're involved in sin, because that's outside the protection of God. Once you're outside God's umbrella of protection, then you are in enemy territory, and God is not going to, he may intervene and mitigate the damage. What I'm very comforted by is that God factors our stupidity into the outcome. And he does minimize the damage of our dumb decisions. But at the same time, if we're going to willfully disobey and willfully be selfish, then he is going to leave us to our own devices. You don't want to be left to your own devices.
No, you don't.
That ends up being a bad place really quickly.
Yeah.
If you want, on a macro level, if you want to see that, look at Los Angeles. what's going on over there. That place is turned into a hellhole.
So my wife told me this. So my wife was out and about the other day and at a park with the grandkids, and there's this, she said, an attractive younger woman with a couple kids, and then the husband showed up, and then the wife left. It was like at a park or something, and then the husband was watching the kids, and I don't even know how the conversation started, but apparently they just moved here from Los Angeles, and so he had just flown in, so he's flying into Provo because there's a cheap flight from LA to Provo. He just flew in, and so that's why he's with the kids, and that's why he was running late or whatever. But so he's flying out Sunday night or Monday to LA, works there 5 days a week, and then flies back on Friday. He says it's so bad in Los Angeles that it's worth the transition, and it's worth getting the wife and kids out of LA up here in Utah and him commuting by plane every week. And they moved you from Brentwood. Brentwood isn't a slummy area. No, it was in Brentwood. Yeah, it was something like that. I mean, it was like near is it Brentwood? It's near Beverly Hills. It's in that area. It's like this. It's not like the guy is coming from South Central or coming from Pomona or coming from somewhere like that. You know what I'm saying? He's coming from an upper middle class neighborhood, and he's saying it's bad enough, and he's inside saying this is so bad, I got to get my family out, and they're doing this commute now. Anyway, I just was reminded of that when you mentioned LA. It's gotten to the point where people in those neighborhoods are leaving.
But it's a perfect illustration of what happens when we're given over to our own devices. When you allow a leftist satanic agenda to prevail, and that's ultimately what the communist agenda is satanic.
Right. So, and that's why that's why I'm pretty, I don't know, harsh or whatever word you want to use regarding being an online church or making the internet your church or whatever term is, cyber Christianity, right? Why I'm like, that's really a dangerous thing, and you need to think about real human fellowship, because how much easier is it for you to be left to your own devices, coming under your own reasoning, right? Leaning onto your own understanding. How much easier is it for you to do that, or for that to happen to you, if you're doing this only and not actually interacting with human beings that can keep you in check? That's probably the number one reason why this concerns me, cyber church, is because there's no accountability. You can sit here and say you're accountable to people over email or Skype, but you're not walking with people. It's different. I mean, this discernment is different than physical discernment. It requires discernment both either way. But does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
No.
How much easier it is for you to do your own way, your own thing like this, cyber wise, than walking in actual human covenant community. I think it's a lot easier. So, I think it's dangerous. I can't hold you accountable from afar. As a shepherding, that word alone is going to define the relationship. I can't shepherd people long distance,
Well, and
because there's nuances, personality nuances, character nuances.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been aware of what the issues that we're now being confronted with had it not been for the people that were in my place. And I got a chance to watch them all. And as I've been observing, and my wife and I have been trained over the years to really be observers of people and line things up and to discern what's going on. I mean, part of that is gifting. God has to equip you in order to be able to see what you need to see, especially as a leader. I mean, you got to, when you're a leader, especially in the Messianic movement, you got to be able to see around corners, because the attacks come from all over the place in all sorts of areas, places you wouldn't expect. I've had people who have flaked off and burnt out and done stupid things and, gone off and stuff like that for all basically the same reason, is they didn't want to submit and they didn't want to commit. But the whole essence of my message last week was that we have to be serving one another. The only reason God gave us spiritual gifts is for the purpose of serving one another and building up the community, building up the family, and then you have the congregation, and then you have the body of Messiah. If all you are doing is online, how do you exercise those gifts? Unless it's a teaching gift. You can't shepherd online. You can't be an apostle online.
Right.
You can evangelize. I mean, yeah, I suppose that's possible. Although the vast majority of people I've led to faith have been one-on-one. I've led a few people to the Lord over the internet. It's true. I haven't done that in years, though. And how do you prophesy online unless people are coming to you? The prophets went to the people. People didn't come find them. They went. Jonah walked through Nineveh.
Yeah.
40 days and Nineveh's overthrown.
Yeah. Leslie says, I get that. She understands what we're talking about, but it's very confusing when you're being taught wrong in church. I absolutely agree, but we're also not suggesting you go to a bad church or a church that teaches wrong stuff. And then she says, if I had stayed in the Presbyterian church, I would never have heard about the Holy Ghost and the baptism of the Holy Ghost. My point exactly. We none of us are suggesting you go to a high church or to even a denominational type of church. We definitely do suggest you go to a church that's teaching the Word of God, that believes in the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues, laying on of hands, the prophetic, the spiritual gifts. We would recommend and suggest that over going to a Methodist church or something like that. So, I mean, yes, we do understand. And she says that she needs to learn Torah. Well, again, you can learn Torah like this. You can learn Torah by reading. There's Bible studies and things of that nature. Yes, we're not saying this is this is a tool and a resource. Our concern are for those that do this and only this. But so we understand what you're saying, Leslie, and we agree with you. But again, we're also not suggesting you go to a bad church. Are we I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there with tongues. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to go there today with a minute on the clock. I can't believe people still don't understand what we mean when we say speaking in tongues. How is that not possible? Either they're not listening or they don't really quite understand what the Bible is saying about it. Speaking in tongues with a known language is mentioned once in the Bible. Speaking in tongues spiritually in a spiritual language is mentioned three to four times. So we're not talking about speaking in tongues in a known language. We're talking about speaking in tongues in a supernatural language, spiritual language. That's what we're talking about. And no, we do not believe in any way, shape, or form that speaking in tongues is only speaking in a known language that you don't already know. We do not. That is not the definition we see in the scripture or in the Bible or in the New Testament, and that's not the definition we hold to. So thanks. Not trying to be rude to you, Roic, Iman. So I appreciate that you do understand. Thank you. It's just that's too much to unpackage in a minute. So anyway, hey, it's top of the hour. Another Chameleon Church in the books. Thanks, guys. We'll see you this weekend in Vermilion, Ohio. Be back next week, and it's the end of the month already. Man, winter's coming. Winter's coming.
It is.
Darryl, Jamie, good to chat with you guys. All of you out there in Cyberland in the chat, thanks for being here. We really, really appreciate it. it would be difficult to do this if nobody was interacting or watching.
So please like and share.
Yeah, is that what it is? Subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. What Darryl just said. So we appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next week.
And be a Berean.
Yes, be a Berean in all things, because that's pretty important. Ciao.
You're listening to Chameleon Church. Biblical Antidotes for the Modern Man. With your host, Allan Aguirre.